Back home again in Indiana.
The talking, nagging, lucha watching, puro viewing, indie supporting, drinking, cursing son of a gun of a podcast. Join former pro wrestler and promoter Dave Dynasty and co-host Ike Isaacs as they talk wrestling and interview those within the business, bringing positivity back to pro wrestling. This is the Dave Dynasty Show.
And greetings and welcome to the Dave Dynasty Show. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. This is the podcast based in Indiana, supporting the Midwest and trying to bring positivity back to pro wrestling. Greetings, and how are you? Hopefully you had a good week. Coming off that hugely successful Tommy Rich episode from last week. Thank you for that support. The response was fantastic. It was a great interview. We are glad you enjoyed it. And we have another great one today. We have an interview with Midwest legend, handsome Johnny Starr. This is a great one because, Johnny doesn't do a lot of interviews. So this is a great chance to catch up with him and for you maybe to learn about him for the first time and hopefully not the last. What I like to think is that you guys are hearing these interviews and hearing about these guys, and you're going out and you're Googling them and you're looking up videos and information and learning more about these guys. And a great place to start, you can go to our YouTube page. Just look us up. It's youtube.com/The Dave Dynasty. And every week we have a playlist right there on our main page that has about 4 or 5 matches, interviews, etc. from our guests that week. So that's a good place to start. You can check that there, check out some highlights. So we have that interview coming up soon. I don't know. What's going on right now, right? We don't talk a lot about WWE on here, but Money in the Bank was last night. And the only reason I bring that up is because, they're in the crowd. They honored some St. Louis legends, and one of them was Baron von Raschke, who has really lit the internet on fire with his claw actions and demonstration when he was introduced. And Baron, of course, to Midwest wrestling fans, is very, very known. Was a huge star in the AWA, of course, based out of Minneapolis or based out of Minnesota. But Baron was a big key player for a while in the 70s, even in the early 80s in the WWA for Dick the Bruiser. Held the WWA title, I think, 3 times, I believe. Was a tag champ with Ernie Ladd. So Baron's a big, a legend in the sport to anybody, but particularly to those of us who key in on Midwest/Indiana wrestling. So it was good to see Baron on TV. I'm hoping maybe that means we'll see a little more Baron all around. So, check him out. If he's in your area, you can check a photo, catch a photo and an autograph. Go do that. But otherwise, we're not going to talk about, Money in the Bank because we just don't, right? We just, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. More power to you, to each their own flavor. But that's not what we talk about on here, right? We talk about, we support the legends of wrestling. We support independent wrestling, the future of wrestling. But we try to key as much as we can and as often as we can on Indiana and Midwest wrestling. And that's what we're doing here today with handsome Johnny Starr. We also have, of course, a new Warner's Wisdom from one of the brightest young stars in the Midwest, Mance Warner. If you have not seen Mance in action, do yourself a favor and catch him out of the show. He's talented. He's entertaining. He is the future. So go see Mance, and we've got a Warner's Wisdom with him today, as we do every week. And make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all those things. And you can find links to all of that at davedynasty.com. There's links there for all of those social media outlets. There's links for all of our sponsors, including 123 Pins, our friends at the Mask Republic and Lucha Loot. There is links there for our affiliate services with Amazon.com and HighSpots.com. There's the banner there you can click to easily find all the formats for our past episodes of the podcast. And there, of course, there's a link there to go to our Pro Wrestling Tee store, where we currently have 2 shirts available. Please go buy one. Support the show that is supporting wrestling in the Midwest. We will probably have a new shirt soon because, as we said last week, we had that poll. of what are we going to call ourselves here in the Midwest. Fans of Midwest wrestling, what are we going to call ourselves? And the winner was, we're going to call ourselves the Midwest Express. I like it. I can dig it. There's going to be a shirt coming soon, so check that out. But we're going to take a break and come back with that interview with Johnny Starr. And we're going to do something a little different today. If we can, how about we get the old legend himself, right? The face of Indiana and Midwest wrestling to lead us to the commercial. So, if you will, Mr. Dick the Bruiser, take us there.
We'll be right back.
Hey, thank you for supporting our sponsors here on the Dave Dynasty Show, including 123 Pins. Visit them at 123pins.us for a great selection of pins, enamel stickers, mugs, hats, shirts, you name it, they have it for the wrestling and pop culture fan. And if you go and place an order and enter the promo code DAVE, D-A-V-E, you receive 25% off your order. So go visit our sponsor, 123 Pins, at 123pins.us.
And welcome back to the Dave Dynasty Show. My name is Ike Isaacs, and today we have yet another wrestling legend. Handsome Johnny Starr. How are we
I'm doing
today?
great, Ike. It's good to talk to you.
Well, it's good to have someone of your caliber or experience on the show. We always like to have people who have all that experience so we can kind of pick their brains and see exactly what they're like.
Well, that's good to have this opportunity, and I'm really glad that you guys are doing so much to keep the old WWA alive and some of those great performers. So I think it's a wonderful thing you're doing.
Well, that's exactly why we do it, because we want to keep Midwest legendary wrestling. We want that legendary status of these talents to be remembered. So that's why we bring everyone on here.
Great. Well, you're doing a great job.
Well, we appreciate that. So let's talk about Johnny Starr. So first things first, where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from Greenfield, Indiana, which is about 20 miles east of Indianapolis. And I've lived kind of in that area my whole life. I live in Noblesville, Indiana now, which is a little bit north of Indianapolis. So, I'm a born and bred Hoosier and still am.
Oh, awesome. So what was it like growing up in Greenfield? Did you play any kind of sports, any activities you did?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I had two older brothers, and they were both really good athletes and played college football, and I played football and basketball, and I was a shot putter on the track team, and my father was the circuit court judge in Hancock County, and so I kind of grew up under a spotlight a little bit, kind of like a preacher's kid, where there were certain expectations of how you behave, and I always rebelled against that a bit, but basically it was a good, small town upbringing. Had a lot of friends, and it was a good place to be. We had a good high school. I was the student council president and was kind of active in school politics and that type of thing. But nothing too radical. But I'll tell you, from the time I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a professional wrestler, and that desire never went away.
Absolutely. So, what were your first memories of wrestling, then? Because, if you were wanting to be a wrestler since you were 6 years old, how did that kind of start? How did that vigor for wanting to wrestler start?
Well, in the late 50s, and I'm 65 years old, so in about 1957, professional wrestling was on television nationally, kind of like it is today before the territory days. And so my brothers and I started watching it, and of course Dick the Bruiser was on there, and some of the great stars, even Luthez, and just all of them that became great territory stars. And then they started booking shows at small towns. I remember they came to once when I was 8 years old. Dick the Bruiser was there, and Cowboy Bob Ellis, and Mitsu Arakawa, and people that later became good friends of mine. And I was just enthralled with it. And the crowd, the way the crowd went berserk, and of course Bruiser was the greatest performer ever. He was, in those days, a very young guy, and I don't know, I just caught the fever, I guess, and made up my mind then and there that someday I would be a professional wrestler, and of course eventually that came to pass.
Absolutely. So then, you named a couple people there that you saw and that you kind of looked up to. But were there any other talents at that time that you were really enthralled with, that you were fans of at that point in time?
Well, Dick the Bruiser and Wilbur Snyder were, the big guys in the Indianapolis territory. And, of course, Sam Menaker did some announcing even then, a guy named Chuck Marlowe. But they had a lot of great talents. Angelo Poffo was a big draw in those days, Haystack Scout. A lot of the guys that, 15 to 20 years later, I would end up working with myself. Yeah, they were great performers, and seeing a pro wrestling match, up close in your hometown where you could stand next to the ring and hear the sounds of the match, it was just, it was quite entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely, I think that's a great way to get that, like you said, get the fever for wanting to do that. So certainly that's exactly how I think, that's, first of all, it's a great thing, but also, eventually, like you said, it came to pass that you became a wrestler, you became the same talent, you did the thing that you watched when you were a child, and you eventually lived up to that dream. But of course you had to start somewhere.
Well, that's right. And actually, when I was about 20 years old, I realized one summer that, I'd always wanted to be a professional wrestler, and I hadn't really done anything about it. And I said, if I'm ever gonna do it, I need to do it now. So that summer I was working for a radio station in Greenfield selling advertising, and I actually made quite a bit of money. And so I took that money and sponsored a wrestling match in Greenfield, because I figured if I sponsored the match, at least I'd get to talk to some of the wrestlers and maybe figure out how to get into the business. Well, sure enough, the night of the match was a wrestler by the name of Dale Mann. Dale was hurt, so he was running the ring for him to make money. And I kind of helped him set up and got to talking to him, and to make a long story short, talked him into training another guy about that time too. So he really needed, somebody else to train. The other guy was training was a guy named Max Blue, who did a lot of wrestling for Dick the Bruiser, and so Max and I trained together, and then Dale Mann went down to Kentucky to start promoting shows with an independent group, and he brought Max and I down there to work, so that's how I got my break originally.
Oh, wow. So then, like you said, getting trained back then, like you said, you had to sponsor a show, and then you had to go talk to some people. So it wasn't exactly like today where you can just, email or call a school and be like, hey, I want to wrestle. You actually had to put in the legwork to find someone and talk to them.
Well, that's right, and if you wanted to become a professional and learn the trade, they didn't really have schools like Vince McMahon has nowadays. You just had to kind of know somebody and apprentice under them and talk them into training you. Sometimes they wanted money for doing it. I don't think I paid any money particularly, but that's the way you got into the business in those days. You kind of had to know somebody. And, it's I wouldn't say it's easier today, because I don't think a guy my size today could get into the business. The guys are so big and so athletic. But at least you know where to go, and you would know who to contact to at least find out how to pursue it.
Certainly. So then, along with that kind of training, like you said, it was not exactly like they do it today, no schools. However, back then, something that they did was they definitely taught more about kayfabe. They said, hey, there is this illusion sort of deal with wrestling that people on the outside don't understand exactly what's going on. So how much of that was taught to you? Did they teach you that it was a work, and did they instill a fear in you of, like, breaking the trade secret?
Well, I'll tell you, the first 2 or 3 workouts I had, they didn't say anything about it being a work. I mean, I was smart enough to know that when I looked at it, Olympic-style wrestling, there's a lot of histrionics and show business involved with it. But the first couple workouts, it was really physically brutal. But I didn't care, because I wanted to be in the business, and it really didn't bother me. And then as we went along, as it came closer and closer to time to have my first match, my trainer, Dale Mann, started to kind of show me more of the working aspect of it. But by that I mean, how you throw a working punch, how you apply a hold without hurting somebody, and the basic philosophy in a professional wrestling match is that not that we're working against each other, but we're working with each other.
Yeah.
And it's my job, if you're my person I'm working with, to make you look good and to not hurt. The same for me. So, the biggest compliment you can pay another wrestler is when the match is over to say, hey, it was a night off, I didn't feel a thing. And so those things you learn gradually, but I will say this, the first match I ever had, I'd never even heard the term being smartened up. And smartened up is what they mean by, telling you how the finishes are going to be and things. But I had never heard that term before. So it wasn't like it is today. I mean, the interview you and I are doing right now, you could never have done 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have paid a high price for smartening people up and telling them about the business. Of course, we always thought that if you did that, it would kill the business. Well, Vince McMahon goes out and smartens up the whole world, and the business exploded. So we were obviously wrong.
Definitely. Well, and I think that's something that is kind of, especially with nowadays, I think it's hard to say because, the business was still popular back then as well. But certainly I feel like there was that media exposure element that when everyone thought, well, yeah, now everyone knows that it's a work. Everyone now knows that, hey, that's how it is. And I think a lot of people kind of, if it makes sense, they kind of blew that up and dispersed it to the world because they're like, hey, we know the trade secrets now type deal. But
yeah, and I think that was all good for the business. I mean, for some reason, more acceptable to a different class of people. Money now.
Exactly. Pardon me. So, kind of along the same lines about what you're talking about, you kind of were speaking a little bit on your, when you first had your first match, they didn't really tell you all about that stuff. But when was it that you did make your first debut, your first match?
Well, I wrestled in a little town called Columbia, Kentucky. I wrestled with Max Blue, the guy that I had trained with, and that was probably in 1973. And we match, and that we get together with somebody before the match and actually try to work things out. What you would do. But Denny and I lived close to each other, and being as that was going to be his first match and my first match, we actually did get together and work on a few things. But yeah, I was in 73, and the match went about 10 minutes, and after about 2 minutes, I was ready to throw up because I just was completely spent. Had gone 100 miles an hour the whole time. Got to pace yourself.
Yep. And I suppose that's probably something you learned really quickly then.
Well, you do. I mean, one thing is the guys back in the dressing room, if you're a beginner, they'll watch your match, and then when you come back in, they'll critique it for you. And, interestingly, I got a lot of kind of negative critique because I was trying to do everything I'd ever seen guys do in a main event, and so some of the main eventers didn't like the fact that I was doing that stuff, and so they would criticize me for it, but I was determined to do it because I didn't care what they said. I was determined to get to the top, and so they criticized me, but I continued to do it. And a lot of them down there didn't like me because of that. But I did eventually make it into the Indianapolis area and Bob Luce's territory. So I think it paid off in the end.
Yeah, certainly. So speaking of places that you worked, definitely in your early career when you're first kind of training and first getting your bearings, where did you work?
Well, I worked primarily the first year and a half down in Kentucky because Dale Mann, the fellow that trained me, was from Kentucky, and he was running an independent operation down there, and there were 2 or 3 other guys running independent operations, and in those days, that's where you were going to break in, is with an independent deal. So, you'd drive from Indianapolis to southern Kentucky for $25. But the truth is, I'd have probably paid them $25 because I wanted to get in the business, and I really enjoyed it. But that was where I did about the first year and a half. And then I came up to Indianapolis. I got a little break here, and I came up as what we call a jobber, a guy that's not working main events. They're just kind of feeding you to the big stars, and you're putting them over. But I got a little break because Wilbur Snyder's son, Mike, was a smaller guy, and he was just breaking into the business, and they put Mike and I together in some matches, and we really had some good matches. I mean, we were flying around, and even though we were preliminary matches, the crowd was loving it. And, of course, Mike's father, Wilbur, was one of the promoters up here. And so Mike, I think, put in a lot of good words for me. So I got, when Bobby Heenan left about 6 months after I came into this territory, Bruiser put me into his slot. So that's kind of how I got my break up here.
Absolutely. So then when you first started as well, what gimmick or name did you start with?
Well, I actually started under the name Gorgeous Johnny Starr. And then when I came up here for my first match, and this is really wrestling trivia that I'm sure nobody cares about but me, but I worked a match up in Wabash, Indiana, and I was going to change my gimmick from the Pretty Boy to the Chicago Street Fighter. So I was going as Jocko Chino, the Chicago Street Fighter. And I did that. My wife is in the background laughing. I did that for one match, and Bruiser didn't like that gimmick, and I guess I didn't like it either, and so I went to Gorgeous Johnny Starr, but then when Bruiser decided to put me in Bobby Heenan's place, for reasons I will never know, he changed my name to Handsome Johnny Starr. And we just had Handsome Jimmy Valiant, so it didn't make sense to me, but, you know, if Bruiser said it, then you did it. So that's how that came to pass.
Oh, certainly. So that's kind of odd. It's just like, hey, here's your new name.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the promoters are the ones that can make you or break you. So if that's what they tell you to do, that's what you do.
Absolutely. So
yeah.
Speaking of promoters and speaking of Dick the Bruiser, in the 70s you were a key player for Dick the Bruiser in the WWA. What was it like working there and working for Bruiser?
Well, you know, Bruiser, I worked for Bruiser, you know, full time for somewhere between 2 and 3 years. It was a thrill. You know, I was 22 years old at the time, and, you know, I was headlining cards here in Indianapolis and Chicago and, you know, throughout the Midwest. So that part of it was great, you know, but eventually I got kind of disenchanted with being screwed on the payoffs all the time, and that was, you know, Bruiser was the one that decided what you made. And so I became a little bit of a malcontent, you know, and would complain about it, and Bruiser didn't like people that complained, and so eventually I left, but for about 3 years it was a really good run, and of course, you know, I was doing the manager thing, so I managed Ox Baker and Monster O'Connor, who later became Big John Studd, and the Legionnaires and some others. So it was good. I mean, for a 22-year-old guy, you know, I was on television. People knew me. They recognized me. It was heady stuff. So yeah, it was something I really enjoyed.
Certainly, and kind of like you said before, you were talking about how, you know, when Bobby Heenan had kind of left that area, you were kind of put as Bruiser's choice to kind of fill that spot. So
right.
And, you might have touched on it a little bit, but did you feel that pressure from Bruiser, or did he just let you do your thing?
Well, he let me do my thing. I'll tell you where I felt the pressure was in trying to be the guy that replaced Bobby Heenan. You know, I don't think there was ever a better one, quite frankly, than Bobby Heenan. And so here I was the guy that had to follow him, and that was really hard to do. And I don't think, you know, I think if Bobby Heenan had never existed and you know, I had just come onto the scene, I would have, you know, I think people would have held me in higher regard than they do, but when they compare me to Bobby Heenan, you know, he was just the best, and I've always thought that. We're not particularly friends or anything, but I think he was good. So following him was hard, but I still enjoyed it. You know, at the time I didn't realize that I was probably coming up short. Bruiser seemed to be happy with what I was doing, and I had offers to go to other places, but you know, the only place I ever went was to Memphis a couple times, but I just wanted to stay around here. And so Bruiser was okay with what I did. He liked my work, I think, but he just didn't like to pay anybody, and that got a little old.
Yeah, I think that would definitely get old, definitely. So
yeah.
Something also that I kind of just have notated here, because I just have some notes that I look at when we have conversations, but it's like, I see that you were an English major at Indiana University.
Yeah, that's right. I was actually, I think, a junior at Indiana University when I started in the business, and I was in the School of Education studying to be a teacher and was an English major. And that was kind of interesting to be a student on campus and to be on TV, every night. And so I'd go to class, and I had dyed blonde hair, and there'd be these fraternity guys, and, they're looking at me like, God, this looks just like the guy I saw in wrestling at 2 o'clock in the morning, And finally, one time at the TV studio, we received a letter from one of the IU, Indiana University fraternities, asking for a picture of Ox Baker and myself. So we, on a Saturday, at the Bloomington somewhere, and I said, Ox, get a picture and sign it. Let's go by this fraternity house and take it to them. So it's like 2 in the morning. We knock on the door, and these guys are watching pro wrestling on television. And here we are at the door with the picture, and the look on the guy's face was like he was in some kind of alternative reality. He looked back at the TV and then looked at us, and we got quite a kick out of it.
Yeah, certainly. So what was it like balancing those two sides of your life? I mean, certainly as a college student myself, working a full-time job, which like wrestling is at that time, you were probably working every day, and then going to class every day. What was that like?
Well, I wasn't working every day. I was probably working 3 days a week, but, of course this was, I probably was working 4 days a week, I guess. It wasn't too bad. For some days, it was kind of hard to get up after you didn't get in until 2 or 3 in the morning. And it was really hard when I started doing my student teaching at Brown County Junior High. And then, there'd be nights I'd have to leave Brown County, which is south of Bloomington, and drive to the Chicago area, wrestle, get back, and be ready to go teach the next day. So that was a period of time where it was difficult. But again, the fun thing, truthfully, in those days was being recognized, and I'd go into bars in Bloomington and get free drinks, and people would want you to sign autographs. So it was kind of neat to be in college and have that kind of exposure. But I didn't really get to participate in much of the college stuff. I was never in a fraternity. I always lived in an apartment and didn't really want to be in a fraternity or anything. But I didn't get, because I was always gone on the weekends working.
Absolutely. So definitely it looks like you you had a balance. And of course, with any balance, there's sometimes going to be those days where it's going to be a little more difficult to keep. But it does sound like you had a good balance. But
well, yeah, you had to. I mean, to get through, both college and to take advantage of the opportunity in the business, you had to find a way to balance it. So, yeah, I would say that's an accurate statement.
Certainly. And I think a lot of people even now and then probably have a hard time doing that balance between not necessarily school and wrestling, but, wrestling and anything else for that matter.
Yeah. Harder today with all the ways that people are being pulled, and I don't know how guys your age do it, to be honest, but it's I think things are probably harder today than they were for us back then, if you want to know the truth. Oh.
So something else I do have, because you actually mentioned his name, Ox Baker. You were talking about him a little bit, but
yeah.
So, and that was actually something I had written down because it looked like that was one of the first guys that you one of the early guys that you managed. So what was it like working with him?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, one of the first shows I did in Indianapolis, and Heenan was still working here at the time, they brought Ox Baker in for his first show at the convention center, and I did a job for him. He just slaughtered me. But it was only about a month or two after that the Bruiser put me in as his manager, and I'll tell you, Ox was a difficult guy. He wasn't a mean person or anything. In fact, he probably would have been much better off as a babyface rather than a heel, because at heart he really was a babyface. He was just a great big, nice guy. wasn't a mean bone in his body, and he was kind of a clown. And he got a lot of heat on himself from the other wrestlers because of his clowning around. And as a heel, you can't be a clown. You have to kind of keep you have to stay in character.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that all the time, and that caused a lot of guys to not like him. And in fact, he would have had a good run with Vern Gagne in the AWA and probably in New York if he could have, learned how to stay in character and been a little more disciplined about it. But because opportunities. But we had a lot of fun. We traveled together. When he was in Japan, I stayed at his apartment, and he was real nice to me, and I liked him. But after a while, we really grew apart because he was in other areas of the country wrestling, and by then I had decided I wasn't going to travel around. I had other things I wanted to do. So, but it was a good relationship. But in the last 25 years, I really hadn't seen him much.
Oh, right on. So certainly, that kind of being one of your starts in the managing aspect of wrestling. Moving forward, Who else did you manage?
Well, he was the first one, and then I managed Jacques Goulet and Don Fargo, who were called the Legionnaires. Big John Studd, the Strangler, Guy Mitchell, who was a good friend of mine. Both of those guys are gone. Oh, and just various other guys, but those were the primary guys that I worked with. And of course, Bruiser would bring in other managers from time to time. He had the Bounty Hunters with Jimmy Kent, I think his name was, and Jerry, Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. or Jerry Jaffe came in, and he did a real good job. Jerry, I thought Jerry was one of the better performers. He's a real bright guy. Have you had him on your show by any chance?
Which one was it?
Dr. Jerry Graham Jr.
We actually have. We have had him on here before.
Yeah. Well, he's a real sharp guy, and I always kind of liked him. I didn't get to work around him much because he came into the territory just as I was kind of leaving. But we're Facebook friends, and we talk now and then, and his wife just passed away a couple weeks ago, which was really tragic. And but he's a good guy, and really maybe one of the most underappreciated performers. And that was maybe more of a timing thing, but he did a real good job.
Yeah, he was. We actually, when we had him on, he was one of the. He was definitely an interesting person because he had seen both sides of wrestling. Not only had he been a wrestler, but he was also a manager, and he had seen all of that, and he had had that experience. So he was actually a really cool guy to talk to. Yeah,
he's a bright guy.
Yes.
He on his Facebook has a lot of political posts, and he and I are pretty much on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but he's got a great sense of humor, and so we can kind of kid each other back and forth. And he's one of the people that, although we really, again, back 30 years ago, didn't know each other all that well, having reconnected on Facebook has been just one of those things I think has been a real pleasure and a good thing for me anyway.
Certainly. That's probably one of the best things about social media, right?
Yeah, it really is. Well, that's how I found out about your show and some of these other things that are posted on social media. Yeah, I mean, those are the areas where I think it's really beneficial.
Absolutely. So I do have a couple of things I wanted to ask you about real quick. So
sure.
Definitely, first things first, even at this point, we're kind of just taking a couple steps through your career, talking about people who you've wrestled, who you've managed, just talking about all those things, all the people you've met. And certainly you have a nice resume when it comes to who you've worked and who you've worked with.
Yeah.
So the WWA was a who's who of Midwest wrestling legends. Do you have any stories about some of the notable guys you worked with there? Some like the people who you might still talk to today, anything like that?
Well, I don't really stay in contact with too many of them, but the people I really enjoyed working with, Paul Christie would have been one of them. In fact, I was just thinking today, I think I introduced him to Miss Bunny Love, who he later married. I think I introduced him to her in Hammond. But he was a great guy. He was a guy that you didn't feel him at all. I mean, he really knew his craft, and career, and he was a wonderful. Dick the Bruiser was the best. I don't think anybody's ever actually been better than Dick, even though he and I had a falling out because of the pay and everything. I think he was maybe the best ever. The most interesting character, though, was Don Fargo. He had wrestled as part of a tag team called the Chain Gang. And their gimmick was that they were outlaw bikers. And I'm telling you, Don lived the part, and he always did. That's just the way he was. Don actually, in real life, could not read or write. He was a member of the American Nazi Party. He was an incredible artist, but the stuff he chose to draw on things was so bizarre you wouldn't believe it. He was just an unbelievable guy with some incredible stories, because he had gotten mixed up with some, kind of bad people along the way. But he had been everywhere in wrestling, and he'd been there from the early '50s, and I think he only died 4 or 5 years ago. But he was maybe the most interesting guy. I knew Lou Thez, and he had been world champion in the '30s. He was probably 60 when I knew him. But Thez was a great talent, and it was nice to have been able to kind of transcend generations with him. Very intelligent guy, very bright guy. Sam Menaker was another one. Of course, he had been a wrestler, became an announcer, but Sam had been in the movies in Hollywood. He was in Mighty Joe Young and several other pictures. But there's a lot of great people in there that I remember and enjoyed working with, and a lot of stories.
Absolutely. So then, kind of a little more about your career. Definitely, like we said, you went a lot of places. You traveled quite a bit. It sounds like, and then obviously, you had the point in time where you were like, well, I don't want to travel that much anymore. But one place we were curious about where you wanted to go. Did you ever get to go work with the Sheik in Detroit?
I never went to Detroit. I worked for the Sheik in Cincinnati and Dayton, and he actually pulled me into his office because he was the promoter up there, of course, as you know. And he said, hey, I want you to come and work for me in Detroit. I'll put you over. I'll make something out of you. Well, by that time, I had been, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I'd been in the business 7 or 8 years. I was getting kind of sour on the way they paid people, and I wasn't going to drive 5 hours to Detroit for the kind of money he paid. So I turned him down. But I did work, occasionally in Dayton and Cincinnati, which were towns that he ran. I worked for Nick Goulas in Louisville till I got my first paycheck, and called him, said I wouldn't be back. But they offered me a full-time run. The closest I ever came to going to what I would have considered a really good opportunity was I went to Memphis to work for the Jarretts down there. But I made a big mistake because I went down there as a babyface. And I'll tell you, I had no talent as a babyface. I could do heel, but babyface wasn't going to work. But so I went down there and I worked TV one day, and then we went out to Jonesboro, Arkansas, and Jerry Lawler and I were tag partners against a couple guys. I can't remember. One of them was a big Russian who ended up working for Vince, but I can't remember the other guy. And then that Monday, I was supposed to wrestle for the Southern States Championship against Ron Bass, I think. But man, I was just having such a bad time of it. I just called him and said I quit, and I quit the business completely at that time, and probably didn't wrestle again for another year and a half. But that was the closest I came to actually going full-time in another territory was Memphis.
Okay. So then you talked about where you had taken a couple breaks, where you kind of said, this is something, you like you said, you got a little sour with the business, so you kind of took a couple breaks. But when was it that you retired completely from in-ring competition?
I think I was probably 38 years old when I had my last match, and I'm not even completely sure where it was. I think it was in Columbus, Indiana, maybe. So that would be 27 years ago. So it's been quite a while. But I had a college degree, and really I had worked other jobs. I'd worked for some major corporations. But when I was 38 years old, I decided to start my own television station, which I did here in Hamilton County, and I had that for 10 years, and then sold it to go into ministry, which I've done for the last 17 years.
Oh wow! So you've definitely had a very, very successful, life for that matter. I mean, like you said, you had a college degree. You were I think you were a very successful professional wrestler, and then you even went into other things such as owning your own TV station. So it certainly looks like you've had quite an amazing life.
Well, it has been, and I will say this: I think all the things that I was doing as a younger person, the wrestling and the TV and everything eventually kind of helped prepare me to be in ministry. And so, God has a funny way of working, and so I think those were all things that helped me in ministry, and I'm getting ready to retire from ministry in December. I don't know what I'm going to do after that, but yeah, it's been a pretty good life, and as you get older, as I said, I'm 65 now, and I've got a 2.5-year-old granddaughter, and I want to spend a lot more time with her, and I've got a son in Chicago who works for BMW in their computer department. I've got a daughter in Indianapolis that's an emergency room physician, and so I just want to spend a lot more time with them and kind of enjoy whatever time I've got left, I guess.
Well, certainly, we hope that you have plenty of time left, because we want to hear we want to keep hearing stories about all of that.
Yeah. Well, I've got them to tell. So my mother's 100 years old, so I may have more time left than you think. I don't know.
Well, we sure hope so. So I do have a couple more things for you, and we actually have a few fan questions come up here. But one thing I did want to ask you, you were a mainstay in Midwest wrestling for so many years, and you have, we have been talking about memories after memories of wrestling and managing. So when people look at your career, what do you hope they notice about it overall?
Well, boy, that's a good question. I guess I hope that they think that my performance was entertaining, that it was worth watching, and I hope there's a few people out there that thought I at least was close to Heenan, that I didn't completely embarrass myself. I've seen posts on websites which would indicate otherwise, but I guess you want to think that I was in the entertainment business, so I'd like to think that I entertained people and that a few people remembered, and I hope the people in the business and that I came in contact with that really knew me thought I was a decent person and treated them all right.
Certainly. So then, one other thing I would ask is, you wrestled in a time period where, wrestling was definitely different than it is now. So what do you think about the modern style of wrestling? What are your opinions on it?
Well, I don't get it completely. I don't watch it much, to be honest with you. I don't like the fact that steroids are so rampant. I think that's a really bad message for young people. I mean, so I don't like that aspect of it. I do think the athletes are so much bigger and better and do things we never thought of, so I think that's good. And you can't knock success. Vince McMahon has made this thing unbelievably popular and successful. I never imagined that it could be what it is today. But again, probably he's doing the right thing for his audience. And I'm guessing 65-year-olds like me aren't really his audience anymore. So the fact that I don't exactly get what they're doing, it was black and white. You had good versus evil when I was doing it. Now there seems to be a lot of gray area, and they get into some things that seem odd. But I don't really follow it anymore, to be honest.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. I think a lot of times when you've done it for so long, it kind of sometimes not necessarily loses that appeal, but when you've done it, it's not necessarily something that you want to watch all the time.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the things, too, when Vince McMahon took over all the territories, and that was good for the guys that were working for him, but in a lot of ways he distanced himself from people like myself and guys who had been the workers in the territories. And so I think that created some hard feelings with some people. I didn't particularly care. I was kind of done with wrestling by then, and didn't bother me. I had no ambitions of working for the WWF at that time. But I think that, and maybe now they are kind of honoring some of the people that went before. But there was a time they kind of turned their back on us, I thought, and so that didn't set too well with a lot of people.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have, to kind of wrap up the interview, we have some fan questions, if you don't mind.
Sure, that'd be fine.
All right. So, and I think you actually touched on this one already, but Gil from Chicago wants to know if you were able to work or interact with Lou Thez when he toured WWA, and if so, what was that like?
Well, Lou and I were actually good friends, and we traveled together all the time. And I picked his brain, about what wrestling was like in the 30s, and it was a wonderful experience because he was a very bright guy. He was an intelligent man. He was a good bridge player. I'm a bridge player myself. I wasn't then, but my parents were and stuff, and so he was a delight. And in fact, the greatest honor of my life was after he left this territory, he and Lou Costello, who was one of the fabulous Kangaroos, started a territory in Kentucky and Tennessee, and he called me and wanted me to come down there and work for him. And, I felt like that was pretty high praise to have, one of the 2 or 3 greatest wrestlers in history want me to come down there. I didn't do it because I just didn't want to go back down south. But he was a good guy. He was a real credit to the business. And I'll tell you, he was a shooter. He knew how to wrestle. He could hurt you if he wanted to. He never did me because we had a good relationship, but he could have.
Absolutely. All right, so then let's see. Hopefully I'm not butchering this person's name, but it says Glarong from Dublin wants to know what's your favorite memory of legendary Chicago promoter Bob Luce is.
Well, first of all, he was the best. I love Bob Luce. He was so far ahead of his time it wasn't even funny. And if Dick the Bruiser and Vern Gagne didn't hold him back, he would have been Vince McMahon. He had all the ideas Vince ever thought about having long before Vince had them. Bob was a promoter. He was hysterical. He was really a funny guy, and I loved working Chicago shows. We'd go do the TV interviews in the afternoon, and then some of us would go with Bob, and we'd go have dinner at a Chicago restaurant. And, he knew where all the kind of, let's say the Italian restaurants were, in that area. And so we met some real interesting people, but none more interesting than Bob. So Bob was a character, and I really, really enjoyed him. In fact, my wife and I are going up to Chicago this weekend and to visit my son who lives up there, and probably take in a couple of the Italian places up there as well. I really miss those places.
Certainly. All right, I think our last one is David from Aurora wants to know who was your favorite talent to work with and why?
Well, there was a lot of good guys to work with, but to me was the best to work with. And when I was a heel and he was a babyface, I really, really enjoyed working with him because, again, he knew his craft. He didn't hurt you. The idea was we were trying not to hurt each other because if you hurt somebody, you're going to cost them money. And we were all in this together. So, yeah, and Christy was a super nice guy, great guy in the locker room, heck of a sense of humor. He was a pretty good magician, too. He had a lot of talents. In fact, he set me up. He was a good salesman, and a couple times I did some work for him in sales as well for some of the companies he was with. But, yeah, without doubt, Paul was probably my favorite, but there were a lot of good ones. Mike Snyder was a really good one. And, you hate to leave anybody out, but those are the two I remember best of all.
Certainly. All right, so it looks like that's all the questions we have. So as we kind of wrap it up, do you have any social media where fans can follow you and kind of look at what you've got going on?
Well, I'm on social media as just John Davis, I think. I've never tried to actually contact myself, so I can't remember how I'm on there. But, yeah, if they look at my real name is John Davis. And as I said, I'm living in Noblesville, and so if somebody wants to, look me up on Facebook, that'd be great. I always answer any Facebook messages I get and really enjoy hearing from people.
All right, guys, so you heard it. Shoot a message on there, ask him some questions. Maybe he can talk to you guys about some other stories he's got, because certainly he's got plenty. But that's awesome. So certainly everybody hit him up on there and make sure you get all your questions to him.
Well, thank you, Ike. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed the interview, and, anytime, be glad to do it again anytime.
Come crack open a cold one and let Old Manser tell you a story.
King of Big Dog Style, Laird's and Light Beer, the King of the Trailer Court, your favorite wrestler of mine, me.
This is Warner's Wisdom with Mance Warner.
All right, people, here we go. The red light's on. Old Mancer back at it. Right here again. Right here again. Right here again. I'm going to say it 3 times for you people that couldn't hear me the first time, because Old Mancer just like to get that point stress sometime. Okay, here we are. Old Mancer, King of Big Dog Style. Your favorite wrestler and mine, me. Old Mancer, the master of the pop-up headbutt. That's a dramatic pause right there. Oh, wackadoo. The damn phone looked like it turned off for a second there. Okay, hold on, people. Here we go. As I was saying before, I was really interrupted by this technology right here. Old Mancer, King of Big Dog Style, Larry's and Light Beer. Knee pad up, knee pad down. Right here on the Dave Dynasty Show. I can barely talk. My throat's killing me. On the Dave Dynasty Show, out here giving you another edition of Warner's Wisdom. Now, today's a very special day for Old Mancer. Very, very good day. During this week, Old Mancer had a very, very great experience go down. On this edition here, I'm just going to tell y'all about it. I'm not really going to be preaching. I'm not going to be telling you any wisdom. The wisdom here is just something that Old Mancer took part in. Dare I say, was a gift from the good Lord, who's on my side, on my back, helped me out, always watching out for me. Good things happen to good people right here. Now, as I was saying, this is on the Dave Dynasty Show, the best part of the Dave Dynasty Show, Old Mancer. Warner's Wisdom right here. I'm just going to get into it because I'm pretty hyped up. I've been partaking in my gifts during this day. I'm in a good mood. Y'all people should be in a good mood. I'm going to tell you the story of what occurred. I'm just so excited right now, just thinking about it before I'm even telling you what occurred. Okay, here we go. Let Old Mancer get down to business. Let me get down, get funky right here, and tell you what happened. Okay. Old Mancer, as always, is on the road, living a road life, making towns, hitting the pay windows, selling my t-shirts that y'all can find on ProWrestlingTees.com. That's ProWrestlingTees.com. Put in Mance Warner, Mancer, right there's on my page. You can buy my t-shirt, Larry's and Light Beer. It's black t-shirt. It's got white lettering on it. You'll look cool in it. Go buy one now, kid. Now, back to my story. Old Mancer is on the interstate, making these towns, going to the towns, starting up a riot, hitting some wackadoos, hitting the big boots, hitting the pop-up headbutt, and you know I'm hitting the lariats, people. Now, Old Mancer's on the interstate, heading to my next town, right, on the Larry's and Light Beer tour. What proceeds to happen as I'm making this town on the interstate shocked me. It awed me. It was a great experience for Old Mancer. I'm minding my business, driving down the road on the interstate. Beautiful day, summertime. I'm catching a pretty sweet tan at the moment as I'm driving. Old Mancer sees a car, and I can see it. I can see it coming. It's like it was foretold to the Old Mancer. I knew it was about to happen. I see a guy in his car messing around, diddling with his phone, right? He ain't paying no attention to the road. He looking at his phone. He on the Twitter. He on the Instagrammer. He on the Facebook. He on the SoundCloud, the iTunes. All those places you can also find Old Mancer and a Dave Dynasty Show, Warner's Wisdom, on everything I just said. Twitter, Instagrammer, Facebook, SoundCloud, iTunes. Download these every week. They're great. You'll love them. Now, as I'm saying, I'm watching this punk in his vehicle, on his phone. He's looking right at his phone. He ain't paying no attention to the road, right? He veers off the road into the other lane in the oncoming traffic. There is a semi-truck heading right for him. Guy finally looks up. He tries to veer out of the way. The semi-truck tries to veer out of the way. He's hitting his horn. He's freaking out. I'm freaking out. Everybody's freaking out. The semi-truck swerves, goes almost off the road, right? He on the road, he hanging off onto the ditch almost, right? Old Master goes right into business. Not for myself at this time, but for everybody here. Old Master pulls over in his truck, checks on everybody. Everybody's okay. Correct? That is what occurred. Everyone's good at this point. Old Master running on adrenaline here. I'm checking. I'm going from each person. Everybody's okay. As I look up, I look at the truck on the side of it. It's a Bud Light truck. It's filled with light beers. Old Master checks on everybody. I'm driving my beautiful truck. I just washed it that day. It's looking nice. The wheels are looking nice. The rims are looking nice. Everything on is looking nice. Old Master checked on everybody. I've done my civic duty. I feel like at this point, Old Master going, okay, everyone's cool. I'm looking at a semi truck filled with light beer. I make my way to the back of the truck. It is opened up on its own. I'm a God-fearing man. I sit there for a second and I think, what's Old Master going to do? Should I take these beers? Should I leave these beers? At this point, everyone's talking to each other. Everyone's okay. I was the first one there. I helped everybody out. I made sure everyone was okay at this point. I felt like because the back of the truck was open and everybody was okay, that this was the big man shining down a little bit of sunshine on Old Master, saying, this is okay, this is for you. So Old Master jumps into action at this point, and I go, okay, this is what I got to do. I know what I got to do. I got my truck. I jump in my truck. I fly over to the back of it. I back up. I jump out of my truck, into the bed of my truck, into the back of the semi-truck, and I start loading up the light beers into the bed of my truck. Old Master felt like this was the greatest day of my life. I'm going to be real with you people right now. I jumped into action. I made sure everyone was okay. I checked on everybody. Everybody was fine. I gave a good talking to the guy that was on his phone and almost caused everyone to get in a car accident. And I was getting him to talking to while I was getting my light beers. I was filling up the back of my truck with light beers, and I was giving him a little preaching, telling him, stay off your damn phone when you're driving. Pay attention. Oh, I'm just so excited right now. Old Master I don't even know what to say. I'm going to start crying on here. I got all these beers. I got hundreds of light beers. I got case upon case upon case loaded up in the back of my truck. I brought them in. I just don't know what to say right now. I've been sitting here drinking them. I got all my friends over here. We're all drinking these light beers. I'm having a good time. Like I said, this episode ain't gonna be that long. Oh Lord, it's just a blessing, you know. At the end of the day, good things happen to good people, man. That's all I gotta say this week. I ain't got really no wisdom for anybody. Just good things happen to good people out there, you know. I'm happy everybody was okay. I'm happy nobody got hurt. I'm happy that the back of that truck opened up. I'm happy I had my beautiful truck. I'm happy that I filled my truck up with all them light beers. Good things happen to good people. I said it once. I said it a million times. Be safe out there, people. Have a good week. Don't be on your phones while you're driving. Don't run off the road. You could cause an accident. You could hurt somebody. Old Mance right here. Just so happy right now. I'm just so happy right now. I don't know what to say to you people. Other than I'm going to get back to what I was doing, enjoying this gift here from the big man upstairs. Good things happen to good people out there now. I love y'all. Have a good week. It ain't going to be as good as mine. Greatest moment of my life right here. I'm going to get off here. Get on the Twitter, the Instagram, the Facebook, the iTunes, the SoundCloud. Wherever you gotta go, get the old, you know, I'm at a loss for words right now. I'm gonna get off here, get back to my drinking. It's a beautiful day outside. That's all I gotta say, people. Old Master out of here. Until next time on the Dave Dynasty Show, the best part of Dave Dynasty Show, your favorite wrestler, and my Old Master. I'm gonna get back my light beers, people.
Visit our friends at the Masked Republic. Go to luchaloot.com and luchashop.com and use the promo code DYNASTY for exclusive discounts.
And welcome back to the Dave Dynasty Show. This is Dave Dynasty. Thank you again for joining us. We do hope you enjoyed that interview with handsome Johnny Starr. What a legend, what a guy. And like I said, go out there, hit him on Google, and check out more. Don't stop here, right? Don't just listen to interviews, stop there. Go out, do some more research, do some more support, become knowledgeable, because there's a world of stuff out there. But we'd like to thank Johnny Starr from coming on, doing the interview. Thanks, as always, to Mance Warner for his wonders of wisdom. And, so make sure, guys, you're hitting up all of our sponsors, ordering a shirt from Pro Wrestling Tees. We give this to you every week, right? We bring these great interviews with these Midwest legends and these up-and-coming Midwest stars and everything else. We give it to you for free, right? No cost to you. So make sure you go to davedynasty.com, hit our sponsors, support them, and then hit that Pro Wrestling Tees link and order a shirt. And that's the best way for you to support the show and to keep it free. We try to keep the commercials to a minimum as we can, but in order to do that, we're going to need your support. So go to davedynasty.com and support us, right? Order a shirt. We appreciate it. That's all we got for this week. We're going to get out of here next week. We have a great interview with a mainstay of Midwest wrestling scene right now. One of the hottest properties in the Midwest is the group, the stable, Ohio is for Killers. And next week we will have on the podcast the manager of OI4K, JT Davidson. It's a great interview. We have him on next week, so make sure you check that out. Have a good week. Until then, be safe, be good, and keep... Oh, I almost forgot. Let me redo that, huh? How about we redo that? Until next week, be good, be safe, be independent, and keep on growing. We will see you next week. Thank you, and goodbye.